Content marketing is the backbone of every brand's connection with its audience, bridging the gap between a company's products or services and the customer's needs. But what makes it effective? And how do you craft compelling stories that resonate with consumers while educating them on what your brand can provide? That's what we'll be finding out on this episode of Momentum, a podcast by Jotform, where we talk about the technology, productivity tips, insights, and best practices that help us move forward in business and in life. Today, we'll be talking with our very own senior content writer, Chris Bass. Let's get started.
3, 2, 1, liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Maintaining momentum.
All right, so here we are with Chris Bass, senior content writer on the Jotform marketing team. I have to say I've been looking forward to this episode for a while, so thank you for indulging me. I know your job is to write, but today we're going to get you to talk. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you. Glad to be here. Honored to be here.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to have you. For anyone who isn't familiar, any Jotform users out there who have ever read one of our announcement articles or posts for a new product we've released, there's a good chance that Chris has written that. And you've written, I don't know how many tens of thousands of words for us at this point. Basically, you are one of our biggest Jotform experts. And today, what we want to talk about is content marketing, and specifically how that sort of differs from other forms of marketing. But as a content marketing writer, let's maybe just start with how you describe your own role and sort of your purpose here at Jotform.
Yeah, I think the way that I would describe my role is that it's my job to communicate and interpret our products to our customers in the best way, in a relatable way, so they're able to take that information and make the most of their businesses. It's a lot of product heavy information, which, a lot of people aren't used to reading. You want to make that kind of put it in layman's terms, a way that normal people can relate and take that information and run with it and apply it against whatever their business type is, so that they can be as productive as possible. So that's kind of how I view my role.
Right, for sure. And I think that's an important distinction between something like technical writing or writing for support guides or anything like this, where someone has a specific issue or technicality they're trying to figure out, so they're able to look up on a support guide and find exact language and screenshots and all that. You're trying to essentially introduce new topics and ideas to sort of the general public. Like everyone in our newsletter gets these, so it has to be sort of in more layman's terms. And you make it sound simple, but obviously it's a pretty significant undertaking, especially for a tech company where we're constantly coming out with new products and new ways our customers can use the products and features. So there's a lot of complex ideas that you have to break down. So out of curiosity, for someone who does what you do and you're at a senior level at a tech company, I'm curious how you ended up doing this for a living. Like, what was your journey? How did you get on this content writing path and eventually find your way to Jotform?
That's a great question. I think for me, I've always had a passion for writing, which started probably somewhere around my teenage years. Writing doesn't always pay the bills. So navigating to a number of different jobs, I actually found myself working in a tech company kind of capacity for one of the first companies that I worked for. And I migrated over in affiliate marketing and customer success management, which was fun because I'm a relationship person, and that's kind of a relationship market.
Sure.
So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, building relationships, understanding new businesses, how to help people grow their businesses online. But after a while, I wasn't following my passion. And so that was something that I always had in the back of my mind that I always wanted to do. thankfully, with one of the companies I was working with, they had an opportunity for a their first content hire. So I interviewed like anybody else and got the role and just took off from there. And since then, I've been working in content capacities and kind of following my passion of loving to put words on the page, combined with what I've been fortunate to have, which is a background in marketing and pairing those together.
Yeah, it's kind of an intersection of the two here, right? Because it's content marketing. You're on the content team, obviously, with a heavy focus on writing. I'm curious, were your parents writers? We were talking a little bit about this, I think, before the show. But people who love to write, they're very different from the majority, I would say, of people at our company, at a tech company. A lot of software engineers and analytics gurus. But here in the marketing team, we kind of have the right-brained people, and you would probably fall into that category. I'm sure as well, but I'm curious. Your parents write? Any other background like that?
Not really. My mom was an English teacher for a long time, so that kind of is part of the reason that a love of words and reading were instilled in me from a young age. My dad was completely different, math guru,
funny.
math guy.
So you got your mom's brain.
Yes, pretty much, for better or for worse. And,
Worked out.
Yeah, and so that's my parents. That's where they kind of came from with that.
Yeah. So onboarding at a company like ours, so you had some experience in technology, but I imagine given the depth of Jotform's products, it was a little bit of a different experience to prior content marketing roles. So I'm curious, what was sort of the biggest differentiator between what you're doing now and what you've done and what you've had to write for in the past?
Yeah, it's a interesting question. So I think in my first content role, I was writing more for that same customer success, affiliate market kind of industry language, which is a little bit different from like the SaaS focus. After that, though, I did start working in a SaaS capacity. So I think, I'm lucky. I consider myself lucky in that I've had kind of both sides of the coin in terms of writing experience. But Jotform has definitely been, it was definitely interesting, a kind of a new way of doing things when I got here because not only is it SaaS, but I also discovered, there's just a big full marketing team with a lot of dedicated roles that were already in place, and so that's it's a big plus, but it's also something that you have to get used to, especially if someone's coming from like a startup type of background where they may be the only content hire or the only marketing, kind of dedicated marketing writing hire there. So coming into Jotform was definitely a change.
Sure. And you kind of paved the way a little bit. We always had content marketing and we're always releasing new products, but especially when you joined, I think that was during the pandemic around 2020 or so. That's when I think Jotform really started going through a transition period. Our team grew a lot. Our release train got a lot more packed. We started releasing even more products, more features. We really started to continue our takeoff and our positive trajectory there. So you had to really pave the way, I think, for a lot of that precedent and communication. And the ideas that you sort of break down or use elsewhere throughout the marketing team, like our videos, our product videos, they kind of follow, your guidelines and all your articles. So you have to kind of spearhead all of this. And I imagine it must take a lot of research, especially on products that usually aren't even finished yet. So I'm curious your process when you have an article to write. You know about the release, but it's not up yet. How do you even go about it? Like, what is your process to begin researching and writing for a new release?
Yeah, that's the special sauce right there, right?
Yes. So can't give away industry secrets.
So my process does you kind of touched on it. There's a lot of research that goes into the process up front. So before I even start writing anything, I probably spend a good 2 days just researching the product. We've since put in some processes to kind of help with this, but before we did that, I would even do a little sneaking around in our Google Drive just to find out what the product developers were working on.
Search for the keywords, see what's there.
That's right. Just to do a little snooping to see what I could find because, I want to know anything that I can know that's available. I guess, once I get done with the research phase, then I kind of go into the process of writing. The first thing I do is create an outline. You go back to school. You remember that your teacher saying, "Hey, let's build an outline."
Yep.
So it's no different here. And then I go through. There's a process that I follow, which is it's kind of like a MEIS principle. That's the acronym. I think it's like mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. That's what it's kind of like I think it was invented by McKinsey. It's like a consultant's project manager's
Did you learn
thing.
that in school?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I actually picked that up from a writers group that I belong to. But it's a way of applying that principle to writing. And what it means essentially is you want to answer a central question that you identify when you, whatever topic you're writing about, a central question that the reader has. And then you go about creating content that is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. So you're not being redundant in your talking points, but you are hitting all of the necessary information that you need to hit for the reader to understand and feel motivated to act on what you're writing. So that's kind of it's something that's always in the back of my head when I'm putting outlines together, putting the content together, and then going through and writing it.
That's really interesting. I never heard of that acronym before, so I learned something new today. But you mentioned something about narrowing down to the central question. I think that's really important, how you relate it to readers. And it might be different. The way you relate it might be a little bit different from how the developers who made the product, maybe how they express it. Because obviously your job is to communicate it in layman's terms. And you mentioned how you dig around in Google Drive and maybe find files from our developers. But we have to transpose that into really relatable terms for our larger general audience. What would be an example of that central question for either something you've written lately or in the past? What would be an example of that?
Yeah. So a good example for that would probably be our most recent example, which is the Jotform app store builder.
Yep.
Yeah, so and that was it's been a particularly interesting topic because it's kind of like a free flow iteration. It's still being worked on. There are a lot of things that are involved with it, but in order for me to start on that, the first question I kind of ask myself is, okay, for someone who has whether they have a brick and mortar business or whether they're just a small business or entrepreneur, they want to get online, right? And they want to get online. They want a better way or easier way to market their store to their customers. And a great, easy way to do that is through creating your own app, which thankfully, Jotform allows many people to do. And then adding the store builder component is just a way for people to, get their products out to consumers in a very easy, fast way, in a way that's professional. So the central question that I kind of boiled all that down to from a customer or merchant standpoint was how can I, as a merchant, get online quickly, get mobile, and get my products to people as quickly and easily as possible. And Jotform Store Builder was the answer. So after identifying that, then it becomes, I'm writing basically in the mind's eye of a merchant of ours.
Absolutely. Yeah, the process sounds exhaustive. And I think that it sounds, I remember whenever we go through every newsletter, we have a newsletter review, which I'm sure is a common process on a lot of marketing teams, where everyone presents their piece. And usually when you present your big announcement article for whatever product we're releasing, it blows my mind the amount of thought that has to go into it, like from the customer viewpoint, but also you have to encapsulate all these technical aspects too, and the too long didn't read, but all the components that need to be in there, because some readers might want different levels of detail than others.
Sure.
And some might just skim for the main points, and you kind of have to capture all of that in one article, which it always blows my mind. But I think this post was around 3,000 words. I think you've written like a 7,000 word release before. Was that for Jotform apps?
Yes, that was for Jotform apps.
7,000 words.
Yeah,
but it's such a big product too. Like you kind of have to.
Yeah, in a way, and I definitely try to apply my internal editor when I'm writing these, but unfortunately, a lot of times, as you say, there are a lot of bells and whistles that you kind of have to cover. And what's important, especially for something like Jotform apps, which becomes a premier product of ours, that lives on our website. The story or the announcement post lives on the website as it, as part of the actual page. Right. It doesn't go away.
Yeah, it's there forever.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to make sure specifically for those, I include everything that, someone who's seeking that information can get. But yeah, with many apologies to my editor, she knows who she is. I kind of put those things together. But yeah, I try to make it as reader friendly as possible too, because I do believe it is possible to write a long, quote unquote, a long post, but still have it be engaging. So, that's why we include graphics. That's why we include short bulleted lists. It's why we include infographics, different things so that reader engagement can kind of stay in there.
Yeah, it's not just a wall of text. There's a lot of different elements to it, and you have to sort of plan and collaborate those elements, whether it's the statistics, the analytics that come with it. I know sometimes case studies, obviously graphics. Yep. You have to manage all of those in your article, which I think brings us to another interesting point. In your role, you're very much not siloed. Like you have to talk to a lot of different teams to actually make the content that you do from the very beginning when the product isn't even done. You have to talk to the developers, the graphic designers, the analytics gurus out there. Can you talk a little bit about just how many touch points do you usually end up having when you're researching and writing one of these articles, and how does that sort of that cross-team collaboration look?
Yeah, that's actually it's funny. It's one of my favorite parts of the job because you do get to interact with so many different groups. It's also how I learn. But yeah, you're right. When it comes to, I mentioned earlier that some of our processes have been refined. Now we, before we even start working or researching, the developer team puts together a product fit document that kind of lists out a lot of common questions that we have for any product release. And now they started to incorporate that into their process, thankfully. And
it's really helpful all around.
Oh, it's super helpful. And it gets us started on the right foot, right? So, but through the course of creating something, I'm going to be talking to the product developer, asking any questions I need to fill in or any outstanding questions I can think of our customers may have. I'm going to be working with our content operations specialists on graphics and different things that end up going into the article. Working with you guys because we're, as you mentioned, we're putting together videos, and sometimes you kind of need the big picture kind of title sequences or whatever it may be. Our data team as well. God bless them. They're invaluable for us writing because, a big part of building the trust with our audience and anybody else who happens to read our blog posts is to make sure that they know that we know what we're talking about, right? So a big part of that is including data. And thankfully, we have a lot of proprietary data that we can list that just throws our brand authority up And yeah, so I'm often talking with our data team. Let me see. Am I leaving anybody out? Editors. You mentioned, post review meetings. So working with Chad, our VP.
Yep.
Just about everybody. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of collaboration, everything that you mentioned. I think the cross collaboration at the end of the day, I think makes a better product because it makes marketing team a lot more aware of the nuances, and I think it actually helps the developers. Normally, you have several weeks of lead up to when a product is coming out, going to be featured in the newsletter, and they're still putting maybe some final tweaks on it. Yep. So being able to have that communication with the lead developer on that team about the product, I think it actually can help the product as it is being finalized as well, because you're looking at it through a different lens, and I think they realize that. So having all these disparate people talking, despite being separated between here or Turkey or wherever our development team is, it's really beneficial at the end of the day. I think you even started spearheading having them give the marketing team like a presentation or a demo of the product beforehand, which I know we didn't do prior to your arrival, and that's been a super helpful component of, I think, all our launches. So that part's been awesome.
Yeah, no, that's been invaluable too, because it's interesting, especially like going back to COVID and us kind of working remotely. It's been easy to kind of silo ourselves a bit, being in Zoom meetings and that kind of stuff. But having those meetings face to face with our developers, or at least being able to talk over Zoom and having a Q&A is super important, because there are, in the stages of development, especially at the front end, as you mentioned, we have questions that maybe they haven't even thought about, and things to clarify with the product that ultimately end up helping the quality.
Exactly. I think that is the crux of sort of the topic of this episode of content marketing, because I think you look at it, a lot of other aspects of marketing, like for instance, video, if we're making an ad for the product or something, our goal is to be entertaining, to draw people in, to get them interested in the product. But the goal of that communication is not to break down the technical aspects or features of the product. Yep. And content marketing, I think, represents the intersection of that technical component, but also that persuasive, just communicative component, where it has to fulfill both roles a little bit. So I think in some ways content writers and content marketers such as yourself, you have to bridge the gap between these two very disparate components and disparate teams, more so than I think anyone else, which I think is a really cool part about your role. What would you say? I don't know, maybe there's nothing, but what would you say is most surprising for someone to hear about your role?
Most surprising. I don't know. Maybe I think I don't know if it's surprising, but the research. You just spend I find myself spending a lot of time researching products, not just that we have, but that other people have, that the industry has. I find myself researching topics. So just spending a lot of time doing research, because the actual process of putting words to paper, it probably doesn't take me that long, but there's just all the work around it.
Right. Would you say doing the research and formulating the outline before you actually start filling everything in, would that take the bulk of it? Like, what would you say the percentage of time allotment there is?
Yeah. I would say that, because at least for and every writer's different, but at least for me, putting the outline together, once I finish the outline, the writing part is pretty simple, because I build outlines that are really helpful and instructive in filling out the sections I have to do.
Right.
That's me. Somebody else might be completely different, but yeah, that research and outline building is probably the bulk of the time. Like, I don't know, maybe 50%.
Yeah, that's a lot. Really is like they teach you in school at the end of the day. What would you say is one of the biggest challenges you face? Not even at this job specifically, but just content writing in general. Like, what's one of the biggest obstacles or challenges you tend to encounter?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me is just lack of information. When there are holes or things that haven't been filled in, and they're or it's being worked on and has yet to be determined. That's when putting together a big picture for the reader becomes challenging.
Absolutely.
Because you're kind of guessing at that point, like what things should be, and that can lead to either you writing something that is wrong and you have to go back and change it later, which is more time, or you just hold on and you're a little stunted.
Right. And then there's maybe some extra pressure at the end when you only have a day or two to finish things up. I think that's an important thing to note, because we are marketing for products at the same time they're coming out, which isn't the case in every industry.
That's right.
But especially in technology, it's so fast paced. You need to be releasing new innovations to sort of stay competitive. You need to be able to market for them. So it's sort of this dance between development of the product and actually marketing the product that isn't completely done yet, which is very normal in our industry. But I think it's important to shed light on everything that actually has to occur for that to happen.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And as content writers or content managers, whoever in content, I think you find yourself kind of you're almost in like the product marketing kind of role too.
Yeah.
And which is a huge responsibility. Any product marketer out there will tell you like that's a tough job. And so I think content marketers and content writers are they balance that line.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say it's been similar at every single position you've had in content writing? Like your prior industry you worked at, was it as much of an issue there? Or would you say it's specific to technology, or just whenever you're content writing?
Yeah, I'd say specific to technology. When I think of like just big picture challenges, when you're working kind of like in the content space, and you also have, and our editor could probably say a few words on this, when you're engaging with freelancers or contractors, that's also a tough thing to kind of wrangle, because not all the time do they understand like the nuances of your business and your products, right? And so they have a specialty in producing content and writing content, but their specialty is generalized and it's not specific to your business. So that's something that can also be a challenge. Thankfully, I don't have to deal with that too much, but
Heather's got that covered. And that's why a lot of our very specific pieces about products or feature releases are, written by you, for example, as someone who we just pay full time to be an expert on Jotform specifically, and then be able to break that down, as opposed to obviously offloading that in any way, shape, or form. So since you've joined, I guess, what have been some of your biggest learnings? How have you been able to overcome some of these obstacles, especially with the transition to tech, and sort of grow in the role and make all those challenges just a little bit easier? What have been some of your learnings in the way?
Yeah. I think probably the biggest learning that I've had is what led to us kind of going down that product fit document road. I think, some of the best business advice I've ever gotten is know what's knowable. It's a simple 3-word phrase, but it is very deep.
It's powerful.
And so, when I found myself kind of doing that lead work of doing Google Drive searches and what can I find out about this and who can I ask about that, I think that's what kind of helped lead to that development of the product fit doc, which gave us as a writing group all that information up front.
Because we didn't even have that, but when you joined, right? That was a pretty new thing that you sort of spearheaded there.
Yeah, I think Heather and I kind of put our heads together on that, and that was a huge thing that really led to to a huge learning from my part, which was to to set writers up for success. Let's give them as much as we can up front and then fill in the blanks as we go along as needed.
Yeah, the hunt for information. It really is all about that at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I'm curious if we boil down to specifics. Obviously, you're very established here. What would you say are some of is an example, maybe the most interesting or difficult article you've had to write or launch or release? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the most difficult one that I did was is probably a tie between Jotform apps and Jotform approvals.
Okay.
For different reasons. Jotform apps was such a huge launch for us and a huge product.
Yeah, it was a milestone.
It really kind of put us on the map in terms of helping so many people and so many businesses get mobile in a very easy way. And so that thing was very multifaceted, and I wanted to do a really good job with it, which is probably the reason it's about 7,000 words. But yeah, so that was just meeting a challenge. And then Jotform approvals was tough for a different reason because I hadn't been here that long.
That's pretty early on.
Yeah, and that was it was also a big release for us, putting Jotform on the whole approvals industry map.
Right.
And so, yeah, just learning the intricacies of how Jotform approvals works, all the technical details, as you mentioned, and boiling that down to something that was understandable for everybody.
Yeah,
that was tough.
That's a big early project for someone. It's like, hey, welcome to the company. Good luck.
Yeah, yeah.
But it turned out great. That was an awesome release for us. Still a really successful product, obviously, and I think in large part due to our content marketing. So it all worked out. What do you like about what you do? I guess broadly speaking, you've kind of touched on it, but if you had to put it into words, like what do you find rewarding about your job?
Yeah, I think we have as writers we have bios, and they appear at the bottom of every post that we have, right? And so from time to time, there's a link in there that people can contact us if they have questions or comments
Contact
or whatever.
form, right?
And so our contact form has actually been filled. My contact form has been filled out a few times.
Okay.
And I've gotten some really encouraging notes, like from people who are just like, "Thank you for writing that. It really helped me understand such and such, or it helped me get my business off on the right foot." And I think as a writer, that's probably the biggest compliment that any stranger could pay to you, is that what you've written helped them in whatever they're doing. And so that's what I find the most rewarding. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm writing. What I'm writing is like, okay, I want to put this together in a way that will make somebody send me that note. So yeah, that's what's most rewarding for me.
That's incredible. Well, like we mentioned, for a long article goes over all the specifics about how to use a product, you might get a bunch of people who skim it's like, great, Jotform release something else, like awesome. But you'll get the occasional person who is legitimately like scrambling to find an answer to a very specific solution. And Jotform apps is exactly what I need, and like actually needs to delve into the product and understand a lot about it, because it's maybe on them to own it for their company then to implement it themselves. So they are desperate for the answers. And I think finding an article that's well written is the way that you write them, that breaks everything down to easily digestible portions. It's just like a godsend, right? And it might be only 1 out of every 10 people who read it that it clicks like that for them, but I imagine that makes it all worth it. And of course, they're probably the people filling out the contact form. So that's really cool. I guess you're obviously established here. You've had a successful career, still ongoing. If someone is sort of in your shoes, but a younger version of you wants to get into content writing, as someone who's sort of made it at a company like this, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. Let's see. I would probably tell them to, first off, write as much as you can, whether you're writing about professional content or personal content, just write. because the habit of writing really sharpens your skills to the point where, you can put your thoughts together in a relatively short fashion and put something good down on the page. The other thing I would say is, if you're interested specifically like in tech, writing for a tech company or SaaS or whatever it may be, spend time with the developers, spend time with your marketing team, and just hang out with them. If they have a role that comes open, whether it's junior or whatever, join it. And it doesn't even have to be a content role. You may find yourself in those shoes later on.
Sure.
The company that I work for, where I got my first content job, I worked in marketing there for 8 years before they even got to the point where they opened a content function. But when they did, I was ready for it. And so that's what I would say is just write, hang around marketing, hang around developers, understand what is what your company is doing and where it fits within the industry that you're in, and then just start writing about it. And when you get that opportunity, jump at it.
Absolutely. Words of wisdom. Would you say, how much do you read out of curiosity? Your whole day is spent with words. Like, do you write or read for fun ever?
Yes. And so I don't read as much as I'd like to. I probably need to do more reading, but yeah.
You probably read about tech as much as you ever want to, though.
Yes, I do. And I actually do a lot of skimming too. But because that's one thing that writing does. It's like I'm kind of used to the rhythms of how articles are put together. So I skip certain parts I know are like prelude or whatever to get to the point. But yeah, I love to read, love to write. I actually have a blog that is been neglected that I need to get back to. But yeah, I do that for on the personal side too.
Oh, that's awesome. Can I ask what the blog is about?
Sure. It's about passions of mine, which are like travel, style, food, of course. It's called unsolicited.com. There's no E in the unsolicited, but yeah, unsolicited.com.
Okay, we'll put a link to that, guys. Favorite place you've been to? Favorite food you've had? Highlights?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
This isn't Jotform related. I don't care. I'm just curious now.
Favorite place I've been to and combination place and food is probably Naples, Italy. Eating wood-fired pizzas from like mom and pop shops that are like, just
oh my gosh, you're gonna make me hungry.
Little holes in the wall.
Somehow we end up talking about pizza on this podcast a decent amount.
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Back to Jotform. Anything else we missed? I think we covered a lot of good territory about what you do, how you do it, where you've come from, and sort of your very exhaustive process, which even for me, hearing about it from your perspective gives me a lot of respect for just everything and the level of thought that has to go into it. Is there anything you feel like we didn't cover?
Let's see. I don't think so. Just the one thing I will say is that I was surprised when I joined Jotform of like how many dedicated roles there were for the marketing function and for other departments within the company. I think it says a lot for how we work as a well-oiled machine together. Because there are a lot of there are many companies that don't have that level of granularity when it comes to roles and people working together and collaborating. So I think we do a great job of that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that does make all the difference and be able to time the development and the marketing for these releases and make it actually functional and meeting deadlines at the end of the day. And I think people probably don't realize everything that goes into it, like I mentioned, but you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, so, big team.
I'm glad for it as well, trust me. Awesome. Well, I think that's all we got, but this has been really informative for me. I really appreciate you coming onto the show. Hopefully everyone watching has a newfound respect for content writing and everything that goes into it. Next time we have a big release, be sure to check out the launch article. He'll probably written that and it will blow you away. But thanks for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.